Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Putali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tanami. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskat Yeda Satarani Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Dvaita Gadadhara Sri Gaura Bhakta Vindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. So we're still on text 33, and what is it all about? What are the forms of the Lord both in matter and in transcendence? So this is a big subject, and we've already covered several pages, and today we're going to finish it. It says, the impersonalist adduces no activity in the Supreme. Adduces means cites as evidence. And now what evidence do they cite? It's speculation, it's not really evidence. But anyway, it says the impersonalists, the Mayavadis, they adduce or they cite as evidence no activity in the Supreme. But in this discussion between Brahma and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord is said to have activities also, as he has his form and quality. The activities of Brahma and other demigods during the maintenance of the creation are to be understood as the activities of the Lord. Why? Because they're expansions of the Lord, and he's acting through them. The king, or the head executive of a state, may not be seen in the government offices, for he may be engaged in royal comforts. So now he's giving an example, so we can understand why Krishna may not be seen in the material world, but that doesn't mean he's not in control of everything. So the example is the king, or a head executive of a state, may not be seen in the government offices, for he may be engaged in royal comforts. Yet it should be understood that everything is being done under his direction, and everything is at his command. Now this is a mundane example, and what does Prabhupada often do? He uses an example that we know of in this world to help us understand something that we don't know of in the spiritual world, right? So he does this often, and he's giving an example of a king or an executive officer who may not be in the offices of his company, but he's directing everything, right? And he's enjoying, maybe, just like Jeff Bezos or these different big guys. They go to the Bahamas when it's really cold and blizzardy here, and they're enjoying in the Bahamas, swimming in the warm waters of the Atlantic or whatever. So, but he's in control. He may not be in the offices, but still he's in control of the whole thing. Right? So the personality of Godhead, so it says, yet it should be understood that everything is being done under his direction and everything is at his command. That's the executive officer or the king. The personality of Godhead is never formless. In the material world, he may not be visible in his personal form to the less intelligent class of men, and therefore he may sometimes be called formless. But actually he is always in his eternal form in his Vaikuntha planets, as well as in other planets of the material universes, as different incarnations. The sun is in the night may not be visible to the eyes of men in the darkness, but the sun is visible wherever it has risen. That the sun is not visible to the eyes of the inhabitants of a particular part of the earth does not mean that the sun has no form. Yeah, so right now we don't see the sun, but it's shining. If you get into an airplane and you keep going west, you'll always see the sun. It depends how fast the airplane goes, but you always see the sun. It'll never set because you're moving in the same way as the sun is moving. So right now, we don't see the sun because the sun is shining on the other side of the earth, and we're on this side, so it's the sun's rays are being stopped, or they're on the other side of the earth. So he's giving two examples here of things that are in the material world to help us understand what's going on in the spiritual world. So Krishna is not present in the material world in his original form. But his original form, it doesn't mean that it's become formless. This is what the Mayavadis are saying. And they also say that God does, or Krishna doesn't have any activities. Krishna has plenty of activities. In fact, by his energies, everything is happening in the material world. That's activity. And by his transcendental presence in the spiritual world, he is engaged in all kinds of pastimes with his pure devotees. Okay, so then it says, in the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 1.4.1, there is the hymn, Atmai Vedan Agra Asit Purusha Vidaha. This mantra indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, even before the appearance of the Purusha incarnation. So it's before Mahavishnu appeared, right? And it says, in Bhagavad Gita 15:18, it is said that Lord Krishna is Purushottama because he is the Supreme Purusha, transcendental even to the Purusha Akshara. So Purusha Akshara is Mahavishnu. Akshara means that he is beyond the infallible. In other words, he is perfect in every way. So the Purusha Akshara is Mahavishnu. And the Purusha Kshara, so there's Akshara and Shara. So the Purusha Kshara is you and me, the living entities. We are subject to the laws of material nature. But a Purusha Akshara, like Mahavishnu, he's not subject to the laws of material nature. So, to come back to the first statement from the Atmai Vedan Agra Asit Purusha Vidaha from the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. Well, I looked that up with a little more information. Let's see where it is. Okay, so this gets us into the question of Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman. So there's a purport by Srila Baladev Vidyabhusan. Well, first of all, there's a statement. If one says that the Brahman described in the Vedas is Saguna Brahman, a manifestation of the modes of material nature, and not the original Supreme Lord himself, then I say this cannot be true, because Brahman is described in the Vedas as Atma, the Supreme Self. So this is in reference to a Vedanta Sutra statement, which is 2nd Canto, 1st chapter, 6th verse. Gonash sen natma sabdat. So Gona means Saguna Brahma, or the Lord's potencies, and Chet means if, Na means not, Atma means Atma, Sabdat because of the word. So if one says that the Brahman described in the Vedas is Saguna Brahman, a manifestation of the modes of material nature and not the original Supreme Lord himself, then I say this cannot be true because Brahman is described in the Vedas as Atma, the Supreme Self. So the purport by Srila Baladev Vidyabhusan says The Brahman described in the Vedas is not merely a saguna manifestation of the mode of goodness. Why? Because the Vedas use the word Atma, the Supreme Self, to describe him. For example, Atmai Vedan Agra Asit Purusha Vida. So that's the verse that Prabhupada quotes here in 2.9.33 that we're reading. And he says, and the translation of that is, the Supreme Self, Atma, who is a transcendental person, existed before this material world was manifested in the beginning. And they attribute this to the Vaja Saneha Samhita. And here it says the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. So anyway, we won't get into that, but it's the same verse. And then he quotes a second verse, Srila Baladev Vidyabhusan. Atmava idam eka evagra asit nanyat kinchana mishat sa ikshata lokanu srijya. Before the material world was manifest, the Supreme Self, Atma, alone existed. Nothing else was manifest at that time. The Supreme Self then thought, let me create the material planets. And this is from the Aitareya Aranyaka. So, both texts clearly refer to the Supreme Self, Atma, who existed before the creation of the material world. That's before there is the manifestation of three modes of material nature, etc. Right? So also in the commentary on the sutra, this is from Vedanta Sutra 1.1.2, I have already explained that the word Atma primarily refers to the perfect Supreme Brahman and not to anyone or anything else. For this reason, the word Atma used in the scriptures should be understood to refer to the transcendental Supreme Personality Godhead and not to any material manifestation of the mode of goodness. The transcendental Supreme Person is described in the following statements of the Vedic literatures: Vedanti tat tatvedas tatvam yajganamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. And that says, learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.11. So, let's look into this a little bit more because there's more information in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. It says, see, why are we going over this? Because Sankaracharya and the Mayavadis are saying, number one, God has no activity. That's wrong. And number two, they say, if Krishna appears in the material world, he does in a material body. And therefore, and that means if he has a material body, he's subject to the modes of material nature. But that's also not true. And what is true is that Krishna, when it says it says, before the material world was manifest, the Supreme Self, Atma, alone existed. Nothing else was manifest at that time. So now, you can very easily get confused here because he's talking about before the material creation takes place. The spiritual world is going on. It never stops. Krishna is there in the spiritual world engaging in his transcendental pastimes. The material world sometimes is manifest and sometimes is not manifest. So when it's not manifest, that's before the material world manifests. So that means only Krishna is present at that time. And so you should not think that, okay, this means that there's nothing going on in the spiritual world as before creation. No, the spiritual world is going on continually. This is the period when the material world disappears, is absorbed into the body of Mahavishnu, and waiting for the next material creation to take place. So at that time, there's only Mahavishnu, who's a plenary expansion of Lord Krishna. Right? Okay, so if we look in the 6th chapter, let's see where is that? It says that, it says 6th chapter, 5th verse, Udarad atmanatmanam, natmanam avasadayet, atmaiva hi atmano bandhur, atmaiva ripur atmanam. And in the purport, it says the word atma denotes body, mind, and soul, depending upon different circumstances. So this word atma has 3 meanings: the body, the mind, or the soul. So you have to understand Sanskrit, you not only have to know the alphabet, you not only have to know grammar, but you have to also know context. So here, depending on the context, the word atma can mean either the body, the mind, or the soul. Now, in the context of what's being spoken here, it says, Atmai Vidam Agra Asit Purusha Vidam. The Supreme Self, Atma, who is a transcendental person, existed before this material world was manifested in the beginning. So now it's referring, when it uses the word Atma, it's not talking about a jiva, it's talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because there's no jivas there, right? There's only Mahavishnu or Krishna, right? So, therefore, the Atma means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In that context, you have to understand context in order to understand how to know what's being said, right? Okay, so therefore, Baladev Vidyabhusan correctly says, the Brahman described in the Vedas is not merely a saguna manifestation of the mode of goodness. Why? Because the Vedas use the word Atma, the Supreme Self, to describe him. For example, Atmai Vedam Agra Asit Purusha Vida. That's the verse that Prabhupada quotes. He doesn't quote the second verse. He doesn't have to. The first verse is enough to establish the fact of what? He says, in the Brihad Aranyaki Upanishad 1.4.1, there is the hymn, Atme Vedan Agra Asit Purusha Vidaha. This mantra indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, even before the appearance of the Purusha incarnation, meaning Mahavishnu. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:18, it is said that the Lord Krishna is Purushottama because he is the Supreme Purusha, transcendental even to the Purusha Akshara, even transcendental to Mahavishnu, who's an expansion of him. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up because if you can read that, you might not understand what they're talking about, right? He is the Supreme Purusha, transcendental even to the Purusha Akshara and the Purusha Kshara. The Purusha Kshara is you and me, Jivas, and the Purusha Akshara is Mahavishnu. The Akshara Purusha, or Mahavishnu, throws his glance over Prakriti, or material nature, but the Purushottama existed even before that. That means Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who's the source of all expansions, exists even before Mahavishnu. Right? The Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad therefore confirms the statement of the Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Person, Purushottama. So he's quoting also the verse, 15th chapter, 18th verse. It's next to the last verse, which says, Yasmat Sharam Atito Ham Aksharat Apichottama Atosmi Loke Vedecha Pratitai Purushottama. Now, if you want to know what how to name Krishna, it's Purushottama, right? Purusha Uttama. He is the supreme enjoyer of everything, right? So it says, because I am transcendental, yasmat sharam atitoham, beyond both the fallible and the infallible. So he says sharam and aksharad, if you look at that verse. He says, yasmat sharam atitoham aksharad apichotama. So he is beyond both the fallible and the infallible. And because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as the supreme person. Okay. So in that purport it says, no one can surpass the supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna, neither the conditioned soul nor the liberated soul. He is therefore the greatest of personalities. Now it is clear here that the living entities and the supreme personality of Godhead are individuals. The difference is that the living entities enter in the conditioned state or in the liberated state. The difference is that the living entities, either in the conditioned state or in the liberated state, cannot surpass in quantity the inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is incorrect to think of the Supreme Lord and the living entities as being on the same level or equal in all respects. That's what the Mayavadis are trying to do, you see. There is always the question of superiority and inferiority between their personalities. The word uttama is very significant. No one can surpass the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, his name is Purushottama, right? Uttama, above all. The word loke signifies in the Purusha Agama, the Smriti scriptures, as confirmed in the Nirukti dictionary. Okay, wait a minute. The word loke signifies in the Purusha Agama, the Smriti scriptures, as confirmed in the Nirukti dictionary, Lok Yate Vedarto Nena. The purpose of the Vedas is explained by the Smriti scriptures. Okay, so you have Shruti and Smriti, right? So the Smriti are the scriptures that are spoken about Krishna by his pure devotees, such as Sukadeva Goswami and Sutta Goswami, etc., and also Maitreya Muni and so forth. All these people are pure devotees and is speaking about Krishna. And the Shruti are, it's Krishna speaking about himself, right? All right. So it says, the Supreme Lord in his localized aspect of Paramatma is also described in the Vedas themselves. The following verse appears in the Vedas, Chandogya Upanishad 8.12.3. Tavat esa samprasado smak charitrat samuttaya param, and so forth. The super soul coming out of the body of the human being enters the impersonal Brahmajyoti. Then in his form he remains in his spiritual identity. That supreme is called the Supreme Personality. This means that the Supreme Personality is exhibiting and diffusing his spiritual effulgence, which is the ultimate illumination. That Supreme Personality also has a localized aspect as Paramatma by incarnating himself as the son of Satyavati and Parasara, meaning Vyasadeva. He explains the Vedic knowledge as Vyasadeva. Okay, now what does all this mean? Well, first of all, it's making very clear. One second, let me find that verse. At the end of the 14th chapter. Into the 14th chapter. Brahmana hi pratistaham amritasya vyayasya cha sasvatasya cha dharmasya sukaisya kantikasya cha. And I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So, this impersonal Brahman is the effulgence of Krishna. So, what the Mayavadis are trying to do is eliminate Krishna completely. Now, I'm going to let our Pandit here. He has something to read to tell you. It's very interesting. Yeah, let's take the microphone down so he doesn't have to get up.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I discussed this with Maharaj in the morning. I want to share with everyone. So this morning I was curious to know how the Mayavadi, the philosophers, Mayavadi philosophers, how they interpret Bhagavad Gita verses, where Krishna says, Manmana bhava madbhakto, madhyaji mam namaskuru, always think of me, focus your mind upon me. So I was interested to know how the Mayavadis interpret that word me, where Krishna says, focus on me. Then I went on YouTube and looked up Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. And surprisingly, it showed a lot of lectures from outside ISKCON. So very few from ISKCON, but there are many from outside ISKCON. One of them is from Brahma Kumaris, who is, Mayavadi, big time philosophers. So in that lecture, so that lady, she was
Why don't you show
she was
the
quoting
video?
Yeah. So she was quoting 2.61, Bhagavad Gita 2.61. Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matpara vashehi yasyendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. Where Krishna explains about sthita prajna state, having restrained your senses and keeping them under full control. One who focuses on me is situated in steadiness. And this lady, she says that word me, having fixed.
Play the video.
Yeah, let me play the video
You're
here.
hear
So
this,
it'll be very interesting.
Completely crazy lady
And
speaking.
so this video will tell that point, how they interpret that word me, and also what Maharaj tells in every lecture, right? Mayavadis, they have something called a cancel culture. So whenever I hear that, Maharaj saying in the lectures,
You
I
thought
think
I was exaggerating or
either
something,
Maharaj
or
is
making
exaggerating
something up.
or perhaps there could be a better, word instead of cancel culture, there could be a better word. But in this lecture, that lady, she used the exact
No,
word.
don't say it. Show him.
Okay. I can play here.
No, he can play it here.
Yeah, I can play here. Oh, video also?
It's going to take time to. Okay. You're going to see how vicious and nasty these Mayavadis are. They are the worst of the worst. They're worse than atheists. The atheists, they go up to a certain point and they stop. The Mayavadis don't stop. Especially these people. When he showed me that lady, without even hearing what she said, I told him, that lady is a Brahma Kumari. Right? They are the worst of the worst. They insult Krishna all the time.
So if you talk to outside people, let's say who doesn't understand all of this.
Yeah.
Maharaj, if they don't understand all this, because they are not part of ISKCON and they, as it is, they haven't read as it is, Bhagavad Gita. And if you tell them Mayavadi philosophy, they say, some people, neutral people, they say at least they are following something. So are they, at least we should appreciate, their of course I'm not appreciating, but they say that. How do we answer?
Well, you answer that they are grossly misleading people. And whatever they're practicing, it's all a failure. It's blasphemous. They're the worst insulters of Krishna. So how can you say they're doing something? Yeah, they're doing something. They're ruining Sanatana Dharma. Yeah. Did you find it?
Yes, okay, Krishna Prabhu, play it.
Any situation, any circumstance, and you are sharp. You're like a razor's edge. You will not be distracted by anything in this world. Otherwise, every little thing, you just turn your head, somebody smiles, you also smile. In this room, it's happened. Why? Distracted. Let that person smile. Why are you wasting your time? But you will be distracted. Then you will look the other side. Somebody else is smiling. That person you look at. Something, you're fidgety. Can't concentrate because there is no focus. There's nothing you want to achieve. If you want to achieve something, you will focus. So, if you still practice, then you come to meditation. You qualify for meditation. So this we've already studied. 51, 52, 53. We've already studied that. Now again in 61 he's saying, come back to this verse. You can connect the two now. Having controlled them all, what? The senses. You got to start with physical discipline. If you are not disciplined physically, forget mental discipline. Only when you have completely controlled your senses, you can sit focused on me. See, when Krishna says me, when any master uses first person singular, it is not Mr. Krishna. This height, this weight. It's not the personality Krishna. Krishna is representing the truth, the reality, the ultimate state of perfection. He's only a symbol. So you can cancel me and put the truth, the reality there.
Okay, stop it right there.
So he says, only when you...
So, you see? This is what they're canceling Krishna. Right? And you know, the lady's talking as if she knows something. You know, she's explaining, like, you have to meditate completely. If someone smiles, don't even look at them. Blah blah blah. You know, and then Krishna is not the person. It's just a symbol. What? Lord Brahma is explaining it at depth who Krishna is, and he says in Brahma Samhita, Ishwara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karana. Who are we going to believe? This raging crazy person, or are we going to believe Krishna? You see? So this is a decision that we have to make. Now, whatever I've been saying about cancel culture, blah, 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 it's the truth. I didn't make anything up.
I think he knows this lady lectures.
You know?
He's familiar with these lectures. he told me the name, Sunanda, is it Sunanda ji? Yes, the name is there.
That's all right. Thank you, brother. Hare Krishna. So, here, Krishna says at the end of the 14th chapter that he is the source of the Brahman effulgence, and that there are 3 levels of understanding as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. These people are canceling Paramatma, they're canceling Bhagavan, they're canceling you, the individual jiva. They say that they don't exist. There's only one soul, that's Brahman. They're canceling the material universe. They're canceling Vaikuntha. They're canceling Goloka. They're canceling everything. They're canceling Krishna. So how can you say at least they're doing something? Yeah, they're doing a lot.
I'm saying, when they say, how do we...
No, I didn't say you said it. That's the people that are talking. At least they're doing something, right?
Yeah, how do we make sure they understand that they're...
Well, Prabhu, you have to come to class and understand what we're saying. No, I'm not saying it. You have to understand what Brahma is saying. and what Krishna is saying about himself. You have to understand Bhagavad Gita. Then you can explain to them that these people are grossly misrepresenting Vedic knowledge. They don't understand the Vedas. They have this crazy perception of the Vedas, and they're completely misleading people. So it's like this: if you have a fraudulent real estate agent, and he sells a house to you, and the day you go to live in the house, somebody else is there, and you say, "Oh, excuse me, I don't know why you're here. I just bought this house." They said, "What? We own the house." What? How can you own the house? Well, so-and-so agent sold it to us. He said, "But he sold it to me also." You see? Huh? Happens in India? No, it happens in America also. So, you see, you're being grossly misled by these people. They're frauds. They're lying. And why are they lying? Because they have hatred for Krishna. Anybody who loves Krishna, would they say, he's just a symbol? What? He's just a symbol. That lady said he's just a symbol. That is a huge insult of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're canceling him out as as non-existent. I don't know if you can feel. I mean, anyone who has love for Krishna, they would be very hurt hearing that. And it's blasphemy. It's worse than blasphemy. It's like vicious, right? Yeah, if you take the trouble to hear a Mayavadi speak like we just did, you risk never understanding Krishna consciousness. See? So it's forbidden to even listen to what they say. That's why we stopped it, right? But, no, but you can see how vicious they are. They hate him. Now, how can you be leading people in the right direction if you hate God, if you hate Krishna, and you reduce Krishna to just an it, right? So unless you actually know who Krishna is, you won't feel the hurt, right? So you got stuck because you don't know Krishna well enough to be able to answer these people. They say, well, at least they're doing something. Yeah, they're doing. You have to know the philosophy to convince them, the correct philosophy, right? Okay, so we'll continue now. So Krishna is Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in some of the Vedas, it is also said that in the beginning, so this is some of the Vedas, right? Now, Vedas are vast, right? Like, for example, you have the 4 original Vedas, and in each of those 4 original Vedas, you have Upanishads. There's 108 Upanishads. And also there's the Puranas. There's 18 Puranas. 3 in the mode of goodness, 3 in the mode of rajasic mode, passion, and 3 in the mode of ignorance. 6 in goodness, 6 in rajas, and 6 in tamas. So, there's different slokas for different folks. So people who are in the mode of ignorance, they like to read the Puranas that are in the mode of ignorance. And people who are rajasic, they like to read the rajasic Puranas. But people in the mode of goodness, like the Vaishnavas, they read the Puranas in the mode of goodness. But the supreme Purana is the Mahapurana, Srimad Bhagavatam. It is completely transcendental. It's not in the mode of goodness or passion or ignorance. It's transcendental because it's only speaking about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so, and then the original Vedas, you have the Upanishads. Now the Upanishads are beginning to point to Krishna, but beginning by Brahman effulgence. So then when you get to the Vedanta Sutra, it's going a little bit further. It's also talking about the Brahman effulgence that is beginning to indicate there's something more than that, like the Paramatma. It's only when you get to Srimad Bhagavatam you get Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's a gradual movement beginning from the Upanishads to Srimad Bhagavatam. So anyway, in some of the Vedas, it is also said that in the beginning only the impersonal Brahman existed. However, according to this verse, that is 2nd Canto, 9th chapter, verse number 33, Aham evasam evagre nanyat yat sad asat param. Brahma, this is Krishna speaking. He says, Brahma, he's speaking to Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation. That's the material creation. The spiritual world is not created. It's always existing. Before the creation, when there was nothing but myself, nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. Okay, so here it says that in some of the Vedas, it's also said that in the beginning only the impersonal Brahman existed. However, according to this verse, the impersonal Brahman, which is the glowing effulgence of the body of the Supreme Lord, may be called immediate cause, but the cause of all causes, or the remote cause, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, we have to understand what is an immediate cause or material cause, and what is the what you call the ultimate cause or the original cause. Like, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says in the 13th chapter, it's talking about one second. All right, we'll come back to that. Anyway, it says that the immediate cause or material cause is the material nature of the material creation, because material nature has all the ingredients, right? Earth, water, fire, air, and ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. But the remote cause is Krishna himself. He's the source. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam mano buddhireva chahankara itiyam me binapakratirastata. He is the cause. He is the cause of all those elements. Then the elements seem to be the cause of all the bodies and different things in the material world. But it's the material cause, the remote cause, or the effective cause is Krishna himself. So in every situation, you're going to see this issue. Why? Because Krishna himself does not touch the material nature. He simply impregnates the living entities into it just by his vision, by his glance, and by his expansions, such as the Vishnu expansions. He actually does the creation of the material world, and then the maintenance of the material world, and the dissolution of the material world. So he's not touching the material world at all. So therefore, he is the remote cause that you don't see. You only see the material cause. So here again, he's saying the same thing. He says that, however, according to this verse, the impersonal Brahman, which is the glowing effulgence of the body of the Supreme Lord, may be called the immediate cause, but the cause of all causes, or remote cause, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when Brahma says, Ishvara Paramakrishna Satchitananda Vigraha Nadiraja Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam, he's the cause of all causes. So now we're going back to the origin of everything. And then it says, the Lord's impersonal feature is existent in the material world because by material senses or material eyes, the Lord cannot be seen or perceived. One has to spiritualize the senses before one can expect to see or perceive the Supreme Lord. Now, how do you spiritualize the senses? By engaging in devotional service. Then that awakens your spiritual senses. Why? Because you have your material body, and my material body, is covering the soul, which has a body also. So right now, your spiritual body, only by this material body that we have. But if you engage the material body in the service of Krishna, you purify the senses to a point where your spiritual senses take over. Then you can see Krishna even in this body. Right? So we have an example. Like for example, Sanjaya. He's seeing Krishna. Right? And it's in real time. And he's hearing Krishna. And he's relating to Dhritarashtra what Krishna is saying on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and what's going on there. Right? So his senses have been purified, and therefore now his spiritual senses have taken over. So this is possible for you and me also, if we engage in devotional service seriously. So then it says, but he, Jai Shishirada Nilamadava Ki Jai, but he, Krishna, is always engaged in his personal capacity, and he is eternally visible to the inhabitants of Vaikuntha Loka, eye to eye. So he's visible to the people in Vaikuntha and Goloka. He's not visible to us in this material world, but everything that's going on in the material world is controlled by him through his agents, the Vishnu incarnations and the demigods. Nothing is independent of Krishna. If we understand that one statement, nothing is independent of Krishna, we become Krishna conscious. What do they teach us? What do philosophers teach? What do they teach in schools? They're all teaching that you are independent. The complete opposite of the truth. How can you say you're independent? We were forced to be born. We're forced to get old. We're forced to get sick. We're forced to die. Where is our independence? You're forced to eat. You're forced to go to the bathroom. You're forced to sleep because you get tired, and then you're forced to wake up and work again. How can you say you're independent? Nobody is independent. But yet, again, these false narratives are there. You weren't in these classes, but I explained what is the existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre and others. And, well, they teach that you are independent. You're heroically independent. They make it seem as if it's a wonderful thing to be independent, right? And they puff up your false ego with this idea that you're completely independent. That's completely opposite to what the truth is. None of us are independent. See? And unless we understand that, we go about in a daydream of illusion and waste our whole life thinking we're independent. But at the same time, we're being controlled. And absolutely controlled by the laws of material nature. Laws of material nature means dharma. You cannot escape the laws of dharma or the laws of nature. For example, you can use all the chemicals you want, Botox, this thing, that thing. You're still going to get old and you're still going to die. No one can stop it because you're not independent. And everything that we do, even moving your finger like this, right? You can't do it by yourself. You have to have Krishna's help to do it. And it's a very complicated movement. If you understand, you have these different phalanges, and you have the mind and then the connection of the mind to the finger. It's very complicated. And who is organizing all that? Who is maintaining it? It's not you. You don't know how it's happening, right? Yeah.
So there is latest research at Harvard. One is still very latest, and since they have experimented on the mice, what they did is they reversed the aging by using the technique, whatever the technique they are using, to bring it back to 70% of the normal functional kind of thing. And they again made the old mice to new and new mice to old, so just prove that it's possible. And that's the latest, means as of last week, this is a breakthrough.
Then we should all become mice.
I don't know. Yeah, so this is now how to defeat the ageism. So they came with some
No,
whatever that
then
is.
they said in that article, but will it work on human beings? It works on mice. See. Yeah, but that's like the COVID vaccine will protect you from getting COVID. That's another hoax, right? Then they say, well, at least you won't die if you have the vaccine. No, still people died with the vaccine. So, it's just a false narrative, right? Give you false hope that they're actually getting closer to making you immortal, right? Okay, so, therefore, it says here, similarly, the Lord is not impersonal in his abode, which is always nirasta kuhakam. Now that's from the 1.1.1 Srimad Bhagavatam, the first verse. Nirasta kuhakam, what does it mean? It means that which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. Nirasta kuhakam. Kuhakam means illusory representations, right? And nirasta means not. So, this nirasta means also negation by absence. So, because someone said, well, I don't see Krishna, therefore he must not exist, and he can't have a body, you see. So, but nirasta kuhakam means that illusory representations of the material world. So one is free from the illusory representations of the material world. Who's free? Krishna is free. We're not free, but he is free. We can be free if we take up devotional service seriously and regularly hear Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, spoken by genuine devotees. So it says that, but he is always engaged in his personal capacity, and he is eternally visible to the inhabitants of Vaikuntha Loka eye to eye. Therefore, he is materially impersonal, just as the executive head of the state may be impersonal in the government offices, although he is not impersonal in the government house. Similarly, again, he's using the known to understand the unknown, right? He's giving an example that we know about and showing how it also is pertinent to Krishna. Similarly, the Lord is not impersonal in his abode, which is always nirasta kuhakam, as stated in the very beginning of the Bhagavatam. In other words, free of all illusory representations. Therefore, both the impersonal and personal features of the Lord are acceptable, as mentioned in the revealed scriptures. This personality of Godhead is very emphatically explained in the Bhagavad Gita in connection with the verse Brahmano hi pratistaham. We read that, but let's go back to this other statement. Therefore, both the impersonal and the personal features of the Lord are acceptable. Now, that's also explained in Bhagavad Gita, where it says, let me look it up real quick. The impersonal, okay. there's no argument between, there's not a real major argument. Well, the personal and impersonal are always existing together. And this is, where is it? I'll come back to it. Anyway, in the absence of personal understanding of Krishna, the impersonal conception may be beneficial. This is explained in the 12th chapter. Let's see where it is. 34. Okay, it says that as long as one does not have the chance to associate with a pure devotee, the impersonal conception may be beneficial. This is 12th chapter, last verse, verse 20, verse 20. So it says, impersonal conception may be beneficial. In the impersonal conception of absolute truth, one works without fruitive results, meditates and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. But if you associate with the Mayavadis, you'll be totally misled. So therefore, there are genuine impersonalists, and then there's the phony impersonalists called the Mayavadis. So if you're with a genuine impersonalist, then why does it say that in the absence of a pure devotee, association of a pure devotee, the impersonal conception may be beneficial? Well, because in the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, one works without fruitive results, meditates and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. Fortunately, if one develops directly a desire to engage in Krishna consciousness and pure devotional service, he does not need to undergo step-by-step improvements in spiritual realization. Devotional service, as described in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, is more congenial, meaning more happy. One need not bother about materials to keep body and soul together, because by the grace of the Lord, everything is carried out automatically. In other words, it's saying, look, the best thing, you come directly to Bhakti Yoga. You don't have to go through all the difficult exercises of the yogis, of the people that are mystic yogis, or the jnana yogis, or the karma yogis. You can come directly to devotional service and attain perfection by regulated principles, or sadhana bhakti, under the influence and direction of bona fide gurus. Okay, so this impersonal and personal realizations are always present, and when you understand them correctly, there's no conflict. When you understand them incorrectly, like that lady's teaching, then there's a problem. And then impersonalism becomes very blasphemous because of their false narratives. Okay, so then let's finish this. It says, therefore, in all ways, the confidential part of spiritual knowledge is realization of the personality of Godhead, and not his impersonal Brahman feature. One should therefore have his ultimate aim of realization not in the impersonal feature, but in the personal feature of the absolute truth. The example of the sky, with the pot and the sky outside, and the pot may be helpful to the student for his realization of the all-pervading quality of the cosmic consciousness of the absolute truth. Well, what is he referring to here? He's referring to the example of Gatakas Pratakas. So what is Gatakas Pratakas? That means that there's a pot and inside the pot there's some air. And outside the pot is the whole air, right? So the same thing that's in the pot is outside, but it's a very small sample of it, right? You break the pot, it merges together, right? So how is that pertinent? The example of the sky within the pot and the sky outside the pot may be helpful to the student for his realization of the all-pervading quality of the cosmic consciousness, the absolute truth. But that does not mean that the individual part and parcel of the Lord becomes the supreme by false claim. So this is an example that the Mayavadis give. Patakas, so the Gatakas and Patakas. They give this example. There's air in the little pot, there's air outside. Break the pot, it all becomes one. That is not a good example for understanding who Krishna is, right? Therefore, he says here, but that does not mean that the individual part and parcel of the Lord becomes the supreme by a false claim. It means only that the conditioned soul is a victim of the illusory energy in her last snare. So as long as we are thinking, oh, if I do this meditation, that meditation, I'll become God, that is the last snare of Maya. That means, what does it mean, last snare of Maya? That's the last, let's say, trick of Maya. That means that you're going to be totally in illusion, and you're going to fall back into the very low level of material bodies like snakes and dogs and cats in your next life, because you're completely in an illusion about who you are and what you can achieve through whatever yoga you're doing. So therefore, but that does not mean that the individual part and parcel of the Lord becomes the supreme by a false claim. It means only that the conditioned soul is a victim of the illusory energy in her last snare. To claim to be one with the cosmic consciousness of the Lord is the last trap set by Maya, or the illusory energy, or Daivi Maya. Daivi Maya means that Maya is coming from Krishna. Therefore, you cannot cheat her, you cannot beat her. You will be completely bewildered by her, because she's a spiritual energy of the Lord. Therefore, it says here, it's the last trap set by the illusory energy, or Daivi Maya. In other words, no one, where it says, Daivi esa gunamayi, mama Maya, duratyaya. It's impossible to overcome Maya, but it becomes possible if you surrender to Krishna. Something that's impossible becomes possible by surrendering to the Lord. Therefore, even in the impersonal existence of the Lord, as it is in the material creation, one should aspire for personal realization of the Lord. And that is the meaning of Paschat Aham Yad Itach Chayo Vasisyeta Sosmi Aham. In other words, what we just heard that lady say is the last snare, the last, let's say, illusion, the most profound illusion of Maya. When you reject the personality of Krishna and believe that you can attain some kind of liberation, you're not going to attain any liberation. You're going to be imprisoned very severely for such blasphemous concepts, for believing such a thing, right? So, therefore, even in the impersonal existence of the Lord, as it is in the material creation, one should aspire for the personal realization of the Lord, and that is the meaning of this, the last two lines of this verse. Paschadaham yad etachcha yo vasisyeta sosmi aham. What does it mean? That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead, and after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. That means that Krishna is always existing in the spiritual world in the material world, and he is never diminished in any way. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnana Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. And because he is perfect and complete, whatever emanates from him is also perfect and complete. And because infinite unities of perfect and complete things emanate from the Lord, still he remains perfect and complete. That's who Krishna is. If you understand the invocation mantra of the Ishopanishad, you understand who Krishna is. And the example is the sun. Let's hear what Prabhupada says. There is no other cause of all causes than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. Hari is the name of Krishna. It means he takes away all the miseries of his devotees. Therefore, this verse, Aham Eva, never indicates anything other than the Supreme Lord. Now, that lady was not talking about the Supreme Lord. She was canceling the Supreme Lord, you see. But here he's saying, look, don't waste your time with impersonalism. Just come to Krishna consciousness, because that's the supreme absolute truth. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. He's the supreme absolute beautiful truth, Krishna, and he's the son of Vasudeva. So you're not the son of Vasudeva, I'm not the son of, there's only one person that's the son of Vasudeva, that's Krishna, right? So, one should therefore follow the path of the Brahma Sampradaya, or the path from Brahmaji to Narada, to Vyasa, etc., and make it a point in life to realize the supreme personality of Godhead, Hari, or Lord Krishna. This very confidential instruction to the pure devotees of the Lord was also given to Arjuna and to Brahma in the beginning of the creation. So Brahma in the beginning of creation and Arjuna later on. The same thing was spoken to both. The demigods like Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, Indra, Chandra, and Varuna. Now Vishnu is not a demigod, but he acts like a demigod because he's in charge of the mode of goodness. Brahma is in charge of the mode of passion, or rajasic, and Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance, but Vishnu is in charge of the mode of goodness, because maintenance is more difficult than creation and destruction. Maintenance. So the mode of goodness maintains things. Just like if someone's in the mode of goodness, let's say you trained your kid to be in the mode of goodness, then his bedroom will be very clean. You won't see his socks and his underwear on the ground. You won't see the bathroom dirty and whatever, because he's in the mode of goodness. But if your kid is in the mode of ignorance, then his underwear from 3 weeks ago is still on the ground, right? And his socks, all different types of socks on the ground, and there's some food there that he stopped eating 2 weeks ago, and the whole place stinks. That's the mode of ignorance. See? So in order to maintain things, you have to be in the mode of goodness. Therefore, Shiva can't do it, Brahma can't do it, only Vishnu can do it. But in a sense, he's acting like a demigod because he's controlling one of the modes of material nature, but he's not affected by that mode. Right? Whereas Brahma and Shiva are both slightly affected by the modes. Brahma sometimes gets unnecessarily angry, and Shiva sometimes goes into a rage and starts the pralaya way before it's supposed to happen. So both of them are slightly influenced by the modes that they're controlling, but Lord Vishnu is not. So therefore it says that the demigods like Brahma and Vishnu, Maheshwara, Indra, Chandra, and Varuna are undoubtedly different forms of the Lord for execution of different functions. The different elemental ingredients of the material creation, as well as the multifarious energies, also may be the same personality of Godhead, but the root of all of them is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. One should be attached to the root of everything rather than bewildered by the branches and leaves. That is the instruction given in this verse. Wow. So, therefore, if we go back to another verse, which is the Canto 2, chapter 7, verse 50, that verse says, 2, 7, 50. Second Canto, 7th chapter, 50th verse. And it says, "My dear son, I have now explained in brief the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is creator of the manifested worlds. Without him, Hari, the Lord, there are no other causes of the phenomenal and noumenal existences." So phenomenal means anything you can see, and noumenal means anything you can't see, but it exists. Right? So there are a lot of things. You don't see electromagnetic waves, but they exist. Right? So, since we generally, in the purport, since we generally have the experience of the temporary material world and conditioned souls trying to lord it over the material worlds, Brahmaji explained to Narada Deva that this temporary world is the work of the external potency of the Lord, and that the conditioned souls struggling here for existence are the marginal potency of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. There is no cause for all these phenomenal activities but him. In other words, Krishna is the cause of everything. Everything you see is coming from Krishna, right? Hari, the Supreme Lord, who is the primeval cause of all causes. This does not mean, however, that the Lord himself is distributed impersonally. He is aloof from all these interactions of the external and marginal potencies. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.4, it is confirmed that by his potencies alone, he is present everywhere and anywhere. Everything that is manifested rests in his potency only. But he, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always aloof from everything. The potency and the potent are simultaneously one and different from one another. One should not deprecate, meaning don't insult or don't criticize the Supreme Lord for the creation of this miserable world. Just as one should not blame the king for creating a prison house in the government. The prison house is a necessary institution of the governmental establishment for those who are disobedient to the laws of the government. So this is another example of something you know to understand something you don't know. That is, just like the leader of a country, he also makes jail. Now you say, why did he make the jail? Well, because there are going to be some people, this for sure, there are going to be some people who don't follow the rules, and they're going to end up in jail. In the same way, don't blame Krishna for creating the material world. Blame the living entities who refuse to follow Krishna's instructions, because the material world is created for them for two reasons. One, to give them a chance to feel that they're independent and to engage in sense gratification, and two, to give them a chance to give up sense gratification, give up feeling that they're independent, understand that they are completely controlled by the laws of nature, and take up Krishna consciousness and go back to Godhead. So there's two purposes, and both are because of the unsurrendered living entities. It's not Krishna's desire, but he does it because some of the jivas are not going to follow his instructions. Just like when they first started Samamish, I was here at that time, they rented some of a small part of the not the school, what do you call it? Anyway, they rented a small room, and they had a little one-cell jail in that room. Now, why did they do that? That's the first thing they did. They got their office, and they had a little jail in there, and it's only for one person, because they knew that some people are not going to follow the rules, right? And therefore they needed jail to temporarily hold them until they can be taken to the bigger jail downtown. So don't blame Krishna. What he's saying here is one should not deprecate or blame or accuse the Supreme Lord for the creation of this miserable world, just as one should not blame the king for creating a prison house in the government. The prison house is a necessary institution of the governmental establishment for those who are disobedient to the laws of the government. Similarly, this material world, full of miseries, is a temporary creation of the Lord for those who have forgotten him and are trying to lord it over the false manifestation. He, however, is always anxious to get the fallen souls back home, back to Godhead. And for this, Krishna has given so many chances to the conditioned souls via the authoritative scriptures, his representatives, and personal incarnations also. Since he has no direct attachment to this material world, he is not to be blamed for its creation. I know people that blame God. It's all his fault. He said he made the women too beautiful. It's all his fault that I'm attached, that I'm chasing after women. What? It's his fault? Are you crazy or what? You know, the one man was telling me, it's his fault. It's his fault. You know, he made women too beautiful. Or another one told me, whatever I think, that's what Krishna wants, because he says that he is the mind. So therefore, whatever my mind thinks, that means he wants me to do it. So these are all nonsense people. They make up all these crazy theories, and they preach it, just like that lady, right? She's preaching something that's completely wrong, right? And she's teaching other people that. Okay, so we'll stop right there, and we can start the next one tomorrow. Any questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
So, there are multiple universes. Each those Brahmas are different individuals.
Yeah.
Soul, individual soul.
Yes.
And same with Shiva, but not
No.
Vishnu, right? But only Shiva and Brahma are individual different souls.
Shiva has expansions, different rudras, because he is not a jiva like Brahma. Brahma is a jiva. Shiva is superior. He has an existence in the spiritual world and in the material world. In the material world, he has 9 expansions as 9 rudras. Right? Now, Brahma is always a different person. Right? It's a titular position. Shiva is a little different. He's a little different. But like I said, he has expansions. So I'll look up that subject a little more.
Okay.
But there's a difference between Brahma and Shiva. Although Shiva is born as the son of Brahma, but still, he's both in the material world and the spiritual world. In the material world, he is under the slightly under the influence of the mode of passion. So he's not completely liberated, right? But he has an existence in the spiritual world also. So Shiva Tattva is a little complicated. Right? Brahma Tattva is not complicated. He's a jiva like us, but he's attained perfectional stage, up to 78% of Lord Krishna's qualities. Right? So he's an exceptional person. Okay, so what do you want to know then?
That's my question, Maharaj. Just want to
Okay,
clear up my
I'll
mind.
look up Shiva and give some more information about it.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Any other questions?
So Maharaj, other day you said regarding Lord Brahma's meditation for his entire lifetime, right?
Is for what?
For his entire lifetime, like 100 years.
That was his meditation, right?
Yeah.
And then, okay, what are you going to say?
So that is in, you give the reference as that third canto, 8th chapter, 22nd verse. But then in the same chapter as what we are studying, in the 8th verse, it is said that, Brahmaji meditated for 1,000 celestial years.
Yeah, that's his lifetime.
No, the 9th chapter, 8th verse.
Okay. What does it say?
So in that, Srila Prabhupada, if you read the purport, it is Prabhupada is giving that the whole calculation about what is the celestial years, the demigod years. So my
Okay.
question is, in different places we see these numbers are a little bit different. So normally, why is that reason? Is it like different Brahmas, or how do we understand that? 9298.
Okay, 1 second. Let me write that down.
So here it says the translation.
Okay, well, what was the first,
First one, which
the one I quoted?
yeah, that is what you quoted was 3822. Third canto, 8th chapter, 26.
Okay, and the one you quoted?
298.
Okay. Well, let me go to 298 now. 298. Lord Brahma underwent penances for 1,000 years by the calculations of the demigods. Okay. So when you say 1,000 years, he explains it. It says, 1 celestial year is equal to 6 times 30 times 12 times 1,000 of our years. So that's 1 celestial year. Brahma lives 1,000 years. So you would have to multiply 6 times 30 times 12 times 1,000 of our years 1,000 times.
Let me see the purport. Probably I'll have to read the purport again to understand. I may have to read the purport again, but I understood that it's like 1,000. 1 celestial year is.
Well, it says here, and still he accepted instruction as beneficial for him, and therefore he engaged himself in meditation for 1,000 celestial years. 1 celestial year is equal to 6 times 30 times 12 times 1,000 of our years. Okay? Well, you have to do the math. You do the math. Okay, then you have to multiply that by 1,000.
No, 1,000. No, so actually 1,000 is already multiplied.
So when it says, well, I don't know, it says he underwent penances for 1,000 years by the calculations of the demigods. So 1 celestial year is equal to blah, 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 blah of our years. So you would have to multiply our years by 1,000 to know what 1,000, what is
2 million is.
So anyway, let's discuss it tomorrow night. You can take a good look at it. Right?
Yeah. So I think if I remember when I was teaching, I did a calculation, which is, if you compare that with Brahmaji's entire life.
What?
If you compare that number, whatever it comes to Brahma, it's a very minuscule amount of the entire life. Because it's 3.11 trillion years. That is half a day. This is just 2 billion.
Do the math and we'll discuss it tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. Yes, very, very yes. So, but my question is not that. My question is like, why these numbers? And we see this many, many times. There'll be difference in numbers. or is it because of the Kalpa Beda, or different Brahmas?
I don't want to venture an answer.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just, you
I'll
can answer.
look into it myself also. Yeah. Okay. Any other question?
No question, Maharaj. This is about Lord Shiva's position. You said you want to do research,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's in SB, Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 4th chapter, 16th verse. Sati Devi
Fourth
tells...
fourth canto.
Yeah, 4th canto, 4th chapter, 16th verse.
Yeah, what does it say?
So it's Lord Sati Devi is talking about how Shiva is greater than anybody else there in that assembly.
What?
Sati, Lord
Yeah,
Mother
okay.
Sati was talking about
Yeah.
how Shiva is supreme to Lord Brahma and everybody present there.
Yeah.
He is almost equal. Prabhupada says in the purport is almost equal to Supreme Personality of Godhead, but is not. But Brahma is definitely a Jiva. That's what the same points which you are mentioning.
Yeah.
That's the purport actually in this.
Okay.
Main purport, yeah, main points are those.
Right. Okay. Any other questions?
Harish Maharaj.
Yes, Prabhu.
Maharaj, we devotees experience transcendental bliss more easily than Mayavadis, right? So, naturally, Mayavadis should come to, should take Bhakti Yoga like we do, right? Because they can attain the transcendental bliss more easily. Why they purposefully going to the difficult path?
Because they're misled. They believe things that are not true. Therefore, they waste their time unnecessarily. Just like, why don't all the people become Krishna conscious? Then they wouldn't suffer anymore. No. Huh? Well, no, they're suffering, right? And Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita is saying, look, if you become Krishna conscious, suffering will stop. So why don't they just take it up?
And knowingly
No,
they
because they're full of false concepts in the mind. They're full of false ideas. Yeah, speculations, whatever. They're convinced.
Yeah. But if they can get the happiness more easily, then they should be.
No, but they're getting happiness. I don't know about Mayavadis, but they're getting happiness by liquor, drugs, meat, gambling, illicit sex. They're getting their happiness like that. Just like my uncle, he told me, look, if I follow what you follow, I would commit suicide, because what you're following, those are the four. What you're not doing, those are the four things that give me pleasure: eating meat, drinking liquor, playing around with women, gambling. So those are the things that give me pleasure in life. So if I can't do those things, I may as well commit suicide. And I'm not kidding. He actually told me that. So because people, something goes into the mind, they can never get it out. They don't think there's any alternative.
Also, Maharaj, people like Vivekananda and all, they don't deny Bhakti Yoga. Only
Who?
Swami Vivekananda,
Yeah.
he don't deny Bhakti Yoga in Bhagavad Gita.
No, he doesn't deny Bhakti. He only denies Krishna.
Yeah, he sees Krishna as a teacher, but the process is same in Bhakti Yoga. So,
Look, I can say, you can say anything you want, but either you do the right thing or the wrong thing. That's all. There's always a right and a wrong. So he can say anything he wants, but if he doesn't do the right thing, it's nonsense.
Like you said, Maharaj, they are the reason that people are not following.
Yeah, they're misleading the people.
they also come to temple and they will be seeing Krishna means both Krishna conscious person and the
No,
Mayavadis.
look, he's a follower of Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna said that Durga is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That was his final realization. Durga Mata is the Supreme Personality. So these people are completely an illusion, and they're misleading others. No. No, everybody has limited free will. If you want to be a jerk, you can be a jerk. You know, a complete fraud. Krishna's not going to stop you, but you're going to get the karma. The Vivekananda, he was an excellent speaker. The speech he gave in Chicago was a brilliant speech, but it was nonsense. It was all nonsense. And you know, he showed that he knew what Vaishnavism is. He knew who Krishna is. He showed it in that speech. But his conclusion was that impersonalism. So he was not a dumb guy. He was smart and very good speaker, but he's nonsense.
Maharaj, he says Krishna is Guru because in Bhagavatam, Krishna says Acharya Mam Vijnaniyat. Means know the Guru to be me, says Krishna in Bhagavatam.
What are you reading from?
This is from his book, Bhakti Yoga.
So read it again, very slowly.
Know the Guru to be me, says Krishna in
What?
Know the Guru.
No other guru?
Know the Guru
Oh, know the guru.
to be me, says Krishna in Bhagavata. Acharya Mam Vijnaniyat. The moment the world is absolutely bereft of these, it becomes a hideous hell and hastens on to its destruction.
Okay,
Higher and
give it to me. I'm going to read it myself. I can't understand what you're saying. Okay, so this is chapter 6, Incarnate Teachers and Incarnation. Whenever his name is spoken, that very place is holy. How much more so is the man who speaks his name, and with what veneration ought we to approach that man out of whom comes to us spiritual truth. Such great teachers of spiritual truth are indeed very few in number in this world, but the world is never altogether without them. They are always the fairest flowers of human life. Okay, so where did you read from? You didn't show me. That was the previous chapter.
Minister, this person is a minister, and his son, minister was following Prabhupada. His son, because of his position, Prabhupada was not being a little bit nice with him. He used to go to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, then also come back to Prabhupada. Come and say, okay, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said this, Prabhupada said. Finally, Prabhupada said, okay, tell Ramakrishna Paramahamsa to come and we'll sit and we'll discuss together. But he never agreed. No, but
Ramakrishna was already dead.
So I mean, I think his matter, wherever he was going, he said, why don't they come here, and they can sit and we will discuss about from our books.
Yeah.
Then they said they didn't agree for it, but they were putting in his brain every time he goes, no, that's not correct, because he doesn't know anything. He used to come and ask back and forth. But Prabhupada said, finally, that's not the way to do it. Let them come here, we'll talk.
Yeah,
But
but they're not going to come because Prabhupada will defeat them. That's why they didn't come. Yeah. Okay, so find out what you read, and I'll look at it.